The alarm screamed through the bridge of the UNSC Thunderhawk, and Commander Rachel Morrison jumped from her seat with speed that came from years of military training, and her body moved before her mind fully processed what was happening, because on a warship, every second counted, and hesitation meant death for someone somewhere in the black void of space. Screen in front of her showed a signal that pulsed red and urgent, and the computer was already working to decode the alien transmission. That came from somewhere far away in the outer regions, where few ships traveled, and fewer still survived if they ran into trouble. Lieutenant Amy stood next to Rachel, and her fingers moved fast across the glowing controls that floated in the air. Like magic, but was really just advanced human technology that other species in the galaxy found crude and basic. But it worked, and that was all that mattered to the humans who built it. The message finally came through, clear enough to understand. And it was a distress call from a ship that was dying, and the words were broken and scared and desperate in a way that made Rachel feel cold inside, because she knew what it meant when a ship sent out that kind of message into the dark. And me looked at Rachel, and her face was serious and tense, because she also understood what they were hearing and what it would mean if they chose to respond, or if they chose to ignore it and keep flying on their patrol route like nothing had happened. Did not even need to think about the choice, because humans did not leave people to die when they could help, and it did not matter if those people were human or alien or something else entirely, because life was life, and protecting it was what separated civilized beings from monsters. She gave the order to change course, and the ship responded immediately as the engines burned hotter and the crew moved to battle stations, because everyone on board knew that distress calls usually meant pirates or raiders or worse, and going to help meant going into a fight. The Thunderhawk was a destroyer, and it was built for a war in a way that made other species uncomfortable when they saw it, because human ships did not try to look pretty or elegant like the vessels that belonged to the older races who had been flying through space for thousands of years, before humanity even invented the wheel human. Ships were ugly and brutal, and covered in weapons and armor that could take hits that would tear apart the fragile craft that other species preferred. And the reason for this difference was simple, and terrible Earth was a death world. Most species in the galaxy came from planets that were gentle and kind, and where evolution moved slowly and carefully, and the biggest danger was maybe a storm or a cold season, but nothing that would kill you just for existing. Earth was different, and it was a nightmare planet where everything wanted to kill everything else, and the gravity was so strong that it crushed visitors from other worlds, and the atmosphere was so full of oxygen that it was basically poison to most alien life, and the weather could go from calm to catastrophic in minutes. Humans had evolved on that hell world, and they had survived by becoming the most dangerous predators on a planet. It's full of dangerous predators, and they had learned to work together and use tools and think and plan and never ever give up, no matter how bad things got. So when humans finally left Earth and met the other species in the galaxy, everyone was shocked and terrified and fascinated by these strange, aggressive creatures who came from a world that should not have produced intelligent life at all. The ship jumped through space, and reality bent around it in ways that hurt to think about, but the crew was used to it. They barely noticed as the stars stretched and twisted and then snapped back into place. They came out of the jump, and immediately the sensors lit up with contacts, and Rachel saw 5 pirate ships surrounding one civilian transport that was venting air and clearly dying, and the pirates were cutting into it like scavengers ripping apart a corpse. The transport was Sylvari, and Rachel recognized the design because the elf-like aliens were famous throughout the galaxy for making ships that looked like works of art, with flowing lines and transparent sections that showed the stars beyond. The Sylvari were peaceful and philosophical, and they had been traveling through space for 3,000 years, and they had never fought a war in all that time, because they believed in harmony and understanding. And they thought violence was primitive and barbaric. Rachel disagreed with that philosophy, because sometimes violence was the only language that monsters understood, and right now there were monsters attacking innocent people, and talking was not going to stop them. She gave the order to fire, and the Thunderhawk opened up with everything. It had the railguns were the primary weapons, and they fired chunks of metal that moved so fast they turned into plasma. When they hit, and the first pirate ship exploded before it even knew the Thunderhawk was there because its sensors were too slow and too weak to detect the human warship until it was far too late. The other pirates started to scatter like insects when you turned on a light. And they were trying to run, but they were slow and clumsy, and their ships were old and poorly maintained because pirates did not care about proper engineering or safety regulations. Thunderhawk hunted them down one by one, and it was not a battle. Because battles implied that both sides had a chance, and this was just an execution missiles launched, and they tracked their targets with perfect accuracy, and 2 more pirate ships died in balls of nuclear fire that lit up the darkness like tiny suns being born and dying in the same instant. Inside, the silvery transport Captain Lyria watched through the viewport, and she could not believe what she was seeing because the human ship moved with such precision and such deadly purpose, and it killed with an efficiency that was both beautiful and horrible at the same time. Her first officer was next to her, and he was shaking because he had never seen real combat before, and none of the Sylvari crew had, because their people did not fight wars, and they did not understand violence the way humans did. Illyria knew about humans, and she had read the reports and the warnings that said humans were dangerous and unpredictable, and you should never make them angry because they came from a death world and they were born killers, but she had not really understood what that meant until now, when she watched a human warship destroy 5 pirate vessels in less than 2 minutes without taking a single hit and without showing any mercy or hesitation. The last 2 pirates tried to run, and they were burning their engines hot trying to reach jump distance, but the Thunderhawk was faster, and its weapons had longer range, and the pirates died. Just like the others died, screaming into the void where no one could hear them. Then there was silence, and the battle was over before it really began. And Lyria realized she had been holding her breath the entire time. Communication channel crackled to life, and Lyria heard a human voice for the first time. And it was strange because the translator made it sound normal, but she could hear something underneath the words, something that spoke of strength and confidence and absolute certainty. Commander Rachel Morrison identified herself and her ship, and she asked if the Sylvari needed help, and the question was so simple and direct that Lyria almost laughed because of course they needed help. Their ship was dying, and half the crew was injured, and they would all be dead in an hour if the life support failed. Lyria managed to keep her voice steady as she answered, and she thanked the human commander, and she said yes, they needed assistance, and she gave a brief report on their situation, and the whole time she was wondering what the humans would want in return, because in the galaxy, everything had a price and nothing was free. Rachel responded immediately and said her crew would board the Sylvari ship and provide medical aid and damage control, and she said it like it was obvious and expected and not something that required negotiation or payment. The Sylvari crew watched on their screens as a shuttle launched from the human warship, and it flew toward them, and it was small and armored. And it looked dangerous, even though it was just a transport. The shuttle docked with the Sylvari ship, and the airlock opened, and the first human stepped through, and Lyria saw him, and she understood immediately why other species called humans Deathworlders. Human was wearing powered armor that made him look twice as big as he really was, and the armor was covered in weapons and sensors, and it was painted in colors that reminded Lyria of predators from her homeworld. But when the human removed his helmet, she saw his face, and he was young, and his eyes were kind, and he smiled at her and said his name was Lieutenant Tom Baker, and he was here to help. Behind Tom came more humans, and they carried medical supplies and repair equipment, and moved with purpose and efficiency, and they spread out through the ship, finding wounded Sylvari and treating them with gentle hands that seemed wrong on people who had just killed 5 ships full of pirates. Sami was among the medical team, and she found Lyria on the bridge, and she introduced herself, and her voice was warm and professional, and she asked about the wounded and where they were and what injuries they had sustained. Lyria led Amy to the cargo bay where they had moved the most seriously injured crew members, and Amy looked at the wounded Sylvari, and her face became serious and focused, and she started giving orders to her team. The human medics worked fast, and they used tools and medicines that the Sylvari had never seen before, and some of the treatments looked rough and brutal compared to Sylvari medical practices, but they worked, and injured crew members who had been dying were suddenly stable and breathing easier. One of the wounded was a young Sylvari woman named Kira, and she had been near one of the hull breaches when it happened, and she had burns across half her body, and she was in terrible pain, and the Sylvari medics had not been able to help her much. Me knelt next to Kira, and she looked at the injuries, and she pulled out a device that looked like a gun, and she sprayed something onto the burns. And Kira gasped because the pain suddenly stopped. The spray was some kind of human medical foam, and it covered the burns and contained painkillers and antibiotics and growth stimulants, and it would help the damaged skin heal much faster than normal. Kira looked up at Amy with wide eyes, and she whispered, "Thank you," and Amy smiled and said it was no problem, and she moved on to the next patient. Lyria watched all of this, and she was trying to understand why the humans were helping so much. Because in her experience, most species would provide minimal aid and then demand payment or favors or political concessions. The humans just kept working, and they did not ask for anything, and they treated the Sylvari crew like they were precious and valuable and worth saving. Tom found Lyria, and he had been supervising the damage control teams, and he reported that they had sealed most of the hull breaches and restored life support to the damaged sections, and the ship was no longer in immediate danger. Lyria thanked him, and she asked why the humans were helping so much and what they wanted in return, and Tom looked confused by the question. He said they were helping because the Sylvari had needed help, and the humans had been able to provide it, and that was reason enough, and he said it like it was the most obvious thing in the universal area. Did not know what to say to that because it went against everything she understood about galactic politics and interspecies relations, where every action had a calculated purpose and every favor came with strings attached to them. Seemed to understand her confusion, and he smiled and said that humans had a saying about leaving no one behind, and he explained that it came from their military culture, where soldiers never abandoned their comrades, no matter how dangerous it was to save them. He said that humans had extended that principle to include anyone who needed help because they believed that civilization meant protecting those who could not protect themselves. Lyria felt something shift in her understanding of these Deathworlders, because she had thought they were just violent and dangerous. But now she saw that they were also honorable and compassionate in ways that her own peaceful species sometimes was not. She asked Tom about his homeworld, and he told her stories about Earth, and he described a planet that sounded like something from a nightmare, with crushing gravity and deadly weather and predators that hunted in packs. He talked about how humans had learned to survive by working together and watching out for each other, because on Earth you could not survive alone, and the only way to make it was to be part of a group that had your back. Lyria understood then why humans were so willing to help strangers, because they had learned over millions of years that survival meant cooperation and protection, and never abandoning someone who needed youth. Repair work continued for hours, and the human crew worked without stopping, and they did not complain or ask for breaks, and they just kept going until the job was done. Lieutenant Amy came back to the bridge, and she reported that all the wounded had been stabilized, and none of them were in danger anymore, and she said it with quiet satisfaction, like she had accomplished something important. Lyria thanked her again, and she said that the Sylvari people would remember this kindness, and Amy just shrugged and said she was glad they had arrived in time to help. Rachel contacted Lyria from the Thunderhawk, and she asked if the Singing Dawn was capable of making it to the nearest station, and Lyria checked with her engineers, and they said yes, the ship could fly, but it would be slow and careful. Rachel said the Thunderhawk would escort them to make sure they arrived safely, and Lyria felt relief wash over her, because she had been worried about running into more pirates. Two ships traveled together through space, and the Thunderhawk stayed close to the damaged Sylvari transport like a guard dog protecting its charge, and Lyria felt safer than she had in days, knowing the human warship was watching over them. A journey would take 3 days at the slow speed the Singing Dawn could manage, and Lyria invited Rachel and some of her crew to visit the Sylvari ship during the trip so they could meet properly and share stories. Accepted the invitation, and she came aboard with Amy and Tom and a few other officers, and they gathered in the Singing Dawn dining hall, which was a beautiful space with windows that looked out at the stars. Sylvari had prepared food for their guests, and they were nervous because they did not know what humans ate or if their food would be acceptable, but Rachel assured them that humans could eat almost anything because they were omnivores, and their bodies were built to handle all kinds of food. Meal was pleasant, and the Sylvari crew relaxed as they realized the humans were not as scary as they had seemed in their armor and with their weapons, and they were actually quite friendly and interested in learning about Sylvari culture. Lyria sat next to Rachel, and they talked about their respective peoples and their histories, and Rachel explained that humans were newcomers to the galactic community and they had only achieved faster than light. To travel about 50 years, Agaliria was shocked because 50 years was nothing, and the Sylvari had been spacefaring for 3,000 years, and most of the other major species had similar histories stretching back millennia. Rachel laughed and said that humans did everything fast because their lives were short compared to most species, and they did not have time to take things slow and steady the way older races did. She explained that humans only lived about 80 to 100 years on average, while Sylvari could live for 3 or 4 centuries, and some species lived even longer. And this difference in lifespan shaped how humans approached everything. They moved fast, and they took risks, and they pushed boundaries because they knew they did not have forever, and they wanted to accomplish as much as possible in the time they had. Lyria thought about this, and she realized it explained a lot about human behavior and why they seemed so aggressive and impatient. Compared to other species who had all the time in the world, Amy joined the conversation, and she talked about human medicine and how it had advanced rapidly because humans were so fragile and vulnerable to injury and disease, and they had to develop better treatments or die young. She said that human bodies were actually quite tough in some ways because they could take damage and keep functioning, and they healed relatively fast, but they were also susceptible to all kinds of problems that species from gentler worlds never had to deal with. Tom told stories about growing up on Earth, and he described a childhood that sounded dangerous and exciting, with activities like climbing trees and swimming in rivers and playing in forests where there were animals that could hurt. Youth Sylvari listened in amazement because on their homeworld children played in carefully maintained parks where nothing dangerous was allowed, and the idea of letting young ones run around in actual wilderness seemed irresponsible and terrifying. But Tom said that learning to handle danger was part of growing up human, and it taught children to be careful and aware and capable, and it prepared them for the reality that the universe was not always safe or kind one. Of the younger Sylvari crew members asked if humans were afraid of anything, and Tom and Amy and Rachel all laughed and said, of course they were afraid of lots of things. Rachel said that being brave did not mean you were not afraid. It meant you did what needed to be done even when you were scared, and she said that fear was useful because it kept you alert. And alive, she told a story about her first combat mission and how she had been terrified the whole time, but she had done her job anyway because her crew was counting on her, and people needed help, and fear was not a good enough reason to abandon your duty. The Sylvari understood duty and honor, but they approached it differently than humans did because they had never had to fight for survival the way humans had, and their culture valued contemplation and wisdom over action and aggression. Illyria asked Rachel what humans wanted from the galaxy and why they had come out into space and what their goals were. Was quiet for a moment, and then she said that humans wanted to explore and learn and meet new people and find their place among the stars. She said that Earth had taught humans to survive, but space was teaching them to thrive, and they were excited about all the possibilities that existed beyond their home planet. But she also said that humans would protect themselves and their friends, and they would not tolerate bullies or predators who hurt innocent people, and if that meant fighting, then humans were very good at fighting. The pirates who had attacked the Singing Dawn had learned that lesson the hard way, and Rachel said she did not feel bad about killing them because they had made a choice to prey on the helpless, and they had faced the consequences. Lyria respected that honesty because too many species in the galaxy pretended to be peaceful and enlightened, but they benefited from the violence that others committed on their behalf, and they looked down on warriors. While enjoying the safety that warriors provided, humans were different because they did not pretend, and they did not apologize for being what they were. They owned their capacity for violence while also trying to use it only when necessary. The meal ended, and the crews mingled and talked, and the Sylvari found that they liked the humans more than they had expected to, because underneath the scary exterior, the humans were warm and funny, and curious. Simi spent time with the Sylvari medics, and they compared techniques and shared knowledge. And Amy was impressed by some of the Sylvari healing methods that used energy manipulation and focused thought. Sylvari medics were equally impressed by human emergency medicine, which was fast and practical and designed to keep people alive under terrible conditions until proper treatment could be provided to them. Talked with the Sylvar engineers, and they examined the human repair work, and they admitted that while it was not pretty, it was effective and solid, and it would hold up wealthy. Engineers asked about human manufacturing, and Tom explained that humans built things to last and to be repairable because on-Earth resources were limited, and you could not just throw things away when they broke. This was different from many galactic species who had access to unlimited resources through advanced recycling and matter manipulation, and who designed things to be replaced rather than repaired. The days passed, and the two ships grew closer, and the crews became friends, and Lyria realized that first contact between humans and Sylvari had happened in the best possible way. They had not met as politicians or diplomats with agendas and negotiations, but as people helping people, and that created a bond that formal treaties could never. Machan, the third day they arrived at the station, and it was a major hub called Gateway 7, and it served as a trading post and meeting place for dozens of species. Station authorities were surprised to see a human warship escorting a damaged Sylvari transport, and they immediately contacted both vessels asking what had happened. Rachel gave them a brief report about the pirate attack and the rescue, and the authorities thanked her, said they would investigate the pirate activity. And the Regent, the Singing Dawn, docked at the station, and repair crews came aboard to finish fixing the damage, and Lyria knew her ship would be fine. Now the news of the rescue spread through Gateway 7 faster than light itself, and within hours, everyone on the station knew about the human warship that had destroyed 5 pirate vessels and saved. Sylvari transport of their species came to the docking bay to see the Thunderhawk, and they stared at the human destroyer with its heavy armor and numerous weapons, and they whispered to each other about the Deathworlders who had come to the outer regions. Some were grateful because piracy had been a growing problem, and the authorities had not been able to stop it, but now maybe the pirates would think twice before attacking ships if humans were patrolling the area. Those were worried because humans were unpredictable and violent, and having them in the region might cause more problems than it solved. Lyria defended the humans to anyone who would listen, and she told everyone about how gentle and kind the human crew had been despite their fearsome appearance and capability. She said that the galaxy needed more people like the humans who were willing to stand up to evil and protect the innocent, instead of just talking about peace while doing nothing to achieve either. Words made some species uncomfortable because they did not like being reminded that their peaceful civilizations depended on others being willing to fight on their behalf. The Sylvari government sent representatives to meet with Rachel and thank her officially for saving their citizens, and they offered to pay for the ammunition and fuel that Thunderhawk had used during the rescue. Rachel politely declined and said that saving lives was not something humans charged for, and the Sylvari representatives were stunned because in galactic politics everything had a price. But Rachel was firm, and she said that humanity had joined the galactic community to make friends and help people and build a better future, and you could not do those things if you were constantly calculating costs and benefits. Sylvari representatives went away impressed and slightly confused, and they reported back to their government that humans were even stranger than the intelligence reports had suggested. Meanwhile, at a cantina on the station, Amy and Tom were having drinks with some of the Sylvari crew, and they were celebrating the successful rescue and the new friendships they had formed. Kira was there, and her burns were healing well, thanks to the human medical treatment, and she kept thanking Amy over and over until Amy laughingly told her to stop. Kira asked Amy why she had become a medic, and Amy said it was because she wanted to help people, and she had always been good at staying calm in emergencies, and medicine seemed like a natural fit. She talked about her training and how human medical school was intense and difficult, because human bodies were complicated, and there were so many things that could go wrong. The Sylvari medics who were present nodded in understanding because they had learned during the rescue that human medicine was advanced in ways that compensated for human biological vulnerabilities. One of them asked if it was true that humans could survive injuries that would kill most species, and Amy said yes to some extent because human bodies had redundant systems and could keep functioning even when badly damaged. She explained that humans had 2 lungs and 2 kidneys and could survive with just one of each, and their blood clotted quickly to prevent them from bleeding out, and their immune systems were aggressive and powerful. But she also said that humans were fragile in other ways, and they needed specific nutrients, and they could get sick from things that would not affect other species, and overall being human was a constant balancing act between toughness and vulnerability, and added that humans had evolved to be persistence hunters, and they had the ability to keep going long after other predators would have given up, and this trait carried over into modern human culture. Said that humans were stubborn, and they did not quit easily, and once they decided to do something, they would keep trying until they succeeded or died, and sometimes even death did not stop them if they had set things in motion. Sylvari found this both admirable and disturbing because their culture valued knowing when to step back and reassess, rather than pushing forward regardless of circumstances, but they also recognized that there were times when determination and refusal to give up were exactly what was needed, and the pirate attack had been one of those times. The conversation turned to Earth and what it was like, and Tom and Amy tried to describe their home world to aliens who came from a paradise planet. They talked about oceans that could swallow ships, and mountains that pierced the sky, and storms that could level cities, and the Sylvari listened in horror. They talked about earthquakes and volcanoes and tsunamis and hurricanes and tornadoes, and the Sylvari could not understand how humans had survived long enough to develop civilization. Ami explained that humans had learned to work together and build shelters and develop technology specifically because the planet was so dangerous, and necessity had driven innovation. She said that many human inventions had come from trying to solve survival problems, and humans had gotten very good at adapting to hostile environments. Tom mentioned that humans now lived in space stations and underwater habitats and Arctic bases, and even on their moon, and they were planning to terraform other planets because if you could survive on Earth, you could survive anywhere. The Sylvari crew was beginning to understand why humans were classified as an apex species, despite being relative newcomers, because they had been forged in a crucible that would have destroyed weaker races. Later that evening, Lyria met with Rachel privately in one of the station observation lounges, and they looked out at the stars together in comfortable silence. After a while, Lyria said that she wanted to thank Rachel again, not just for saving her ship, but for changing her perspective on what it meant to be civilized. She said that the Sylvari had always believed that moving beyond violence and aggression was the mark of an advanced species, but now she wondered if they had been wrong. Rachel said that peace was valuable and worth pursuing, but it had to be backed up by the willingness to fight when necessary, because predators did not care about philosophy and bullies, only understood strength. She said that the galaxy needed both kinds of people, and the Sylvari, who dreamed of a better future and built beautiful things, and the humans who were willing to get their hands dirty protecting that future. Illyria asked if humans would consider establishing a regular patrol in the outer regions to help deal with the pirate problem, and Rachel said she would pass the request up the chain of command. She could not make promises, but she thought Earth would be interested because humans believed in freedom of navigation, and they did. Not like pirates any more than the Sylvari did. The two captains talked late into the night about their hopes for the future and how their peoples might work together, and they found that despite coming from very different worlds, they shared many of the same values. Rachel told Lyria that humans were looking for allies and friends in the galaxy because they knew they could not succeed alone, and they wanted to be part of something bigger than them. Sylveslia said that the Sylvari would be honored to call humans friends, and she thought many other species would feel the same once they got past their fear and saw what humans were really like. The next morning, the Thunderhawk prepared to depart and continue its patrol, and the Sylvari crew gathered to say goodbye to their new friends there. Hugs and well wishes and promises to stay in touch, and Amy gave Kira a kit of human medical supplies to help with her continued recovery. Tom left some human tools with the Scifi engineers along with instructions on how to use them, and he said they might find them useful for repairs. Rachel shook hands with Lyria and the two captains, exchanged contact information, and agreed to meet again when circumstances allowed. As the Thunderhawk undocked and moved away from the station, Lyria watched from the viewport, and she felt grateful and hopeful because she had learned that the galaxy was bigger and more interesting than she had thought. The humans were out there now, and they were making their presence known, and Lyria believed they would make the galaxy a better place, even if their methods were sometimes rough and violent. She thought about the pirates who had attacked her ship and how they had died quickly and without mercy, and she did not feel bad for them because they had chosen their path and faced the consequences. The strong should protect the weak, and the brave should stand up to evil, and humans understood that in a way that many older species had. Lyria returned to her duties knowing that her ship was safe and her crew was alive and somewhere out in the black, a human warship was hunting pirates and making space a little bit safer for everyone. 3 months passed after the rescue, and the story of the Thunderhawk and the Singing Dawn had spread across the galaxy through official channels and unofficial gossip networks, and everyone had an opinion about what it meant. The human government received dozens of requests from other species asking for help with piracy and smuggling and various security problems, and Earth found itself in the unexpected position of being seen as a protector admiral. Kate Stevens sat in her office on Earth, looking at reports from across human space, and she was trying to decide how to respond to all these requests for assistance. Humans had always believed in helping others, but they also had limited resources, and they could not be everywhere at once, and they needed to be strategic about where they deployed their forces. She called a meeting with her senior staff, and they discussed the situation and debated the best course of action. Some officers argued that humans should focus on their own territory and let other species deal with their own problems, because getting involved in galactic politics was dangerous and complicated. Others said that this was an opportunity to build alliances and establish humanity as a force for good in the galaxy, and they should take advantage of the goodwill the Thunderhawk rescue had generated. Kate listened to all the arguments, and then she made her decision. She said that humans would establish joint patrol groups with interested species, and they would share the burden of maintaining security in troubled regions. This way, humans would not be overextended, but they would still be helping, and they would be building relationships with other species through cooperation rather than charity. The plan was approved, and within weeks, human ships were patrolling alongside Scifi vessels and ships from other species who had signed on to the Joint Security Initiative. Morrison found herself promoted to captain and given command of one of these joint patrol groups, and she worked with officers from 3 different species to coordinate their efforts. It was challenging because each species had different procedures and different capabilities and different ideas about how things should be done, but Rachel was patient and diplomatic, and she made it work. Her group scored several successes, including the rescue of a merchant convoy and the capture of a pirate base, and each success strengthened the bonds between the different crews. Meanwhile, back on Gateway 7, the station had become a hub for human activity, and more humans were visiting, and some were even setting up businesses and cultural exchanges. Emmy had returned to the station several times as part of medical exchange programs where human doctors taught alien medics and learned from them. In return, she had become friends with Kira, and they worked together on several projects, developing new treatments that combined human and Scifi medical knowledge. The collaboration produced impressive results, and some of the hybrid treatments were significantly better than what either species could achieve. Alon Tom had also returned, and he was helping train Scifi engineers in human repair techniques, and he was learning about Scifi's manufacturing methods that were more elegant and efficient than human approaches. The knowledge exchange went both ways, and both species benefited from sharing their expertise. Illyria had been promoted as well, and she now commanded a small squadron of Scifi ships that worked with Rachel Patrol Group, and the 2 captains had become close friends. They met regularly to coordinate operations, and they often shared meals and stories, and they had developed a deep respect for each other. Lyria had learned to appreciate human directness and practicality, while Rachel had learned to value Sylvari patience and long-term thinking. The partnership between their crews had become a model for human-alien cooperation, and other species were studying it to figure out how to work effectively with humans. Not everyone was happy about the growing human presence in the galaxy. The pirate clans had been hit hard by the joint patrols. They were losing ships and bases and profits, and they were angry. They held a secret meeting on a hidden station deep in unclaimed space, and representatives from a dozen different pirate groups gathered to discuss the human problem. The meeting was tense because pirates did not usually cooperate with each other, but they all agreed that humans were bad for business. One of the pirate leaders, whose name was Vex, proposed that they send a message to the humans by attacking a target that would get attention. He suggested hitting a human colony, or a ship carrying important people, or something else that would force Earth to reconsider its involvement in galactic security. Some of the other pirates agreed, but others thought it was too risky because attacking humans directly might provoke a response that would destroy them all. Vex argued that humans were overextended, and if the pirates coordinated a series of major attacks, the humans would not be able to respond to everything, and the joint patrols would fall apart. The debate went on for hours, but eventually Vex convinced enough of the other leaders, and they began planning a coordinated strike against multiple targets, including human ships and stations, and allied vessels. Intelligence about the pirate meeting reached Rachel 3 weeks later through an informant who had been present and had decided that Vex's plan was suicidal and would get them all killed. Rachel immediately contacted Kate Stevens and shared the information, and Kate put all human forces on high alert. The joint patrol groups increased their readiness levels and began running extra drills and preparing for the expected attacks. When the pirates struck, they hit 5 targets simultaneously, thinking they could overwhelm the defenders with numbers and surprise, but Rachel, group, and the other patrols had been ready, and they responded with devastating efficiency. Battle at Gateway 7 was the largest engagement, and a pirate fleet of 20 ships attacked the station, thinking it would be lightly defended. They were wrong. Rachel had positioned her patrol group nearby, and when the pirates arrived, she sprung a trap. The Thunderhawk and its allied ships came out of hiding, and they caught the pirates from behind while the station defenses hit them from the front. The pirates found themselves in a crossfire, and their formation collapsed as ships began exploding under the combined assault. Rachel directed the battle with calm precision, and she coordinated the allied ships so they did not get in each other's way, and they maximized their firepower. The fight was over in 20 minutes, and 15 pirate ships were destroyed, while the other 5 surrendered when they realized they had no chance. Similar results occurred at the other target locations, and the coordinated pirate attack became a coordinated pirate disaster. The losses were catastrophic for the pirate clans, and they lost over 100 ships and thousands of crew members, and their leadership was shattered. Himself was killed when his flagship was destroyed by a Sylvari vessel that he had not even known was in the area. The failed attack broke the back of organized piracy in the outer regions, and the surviving pirates scattered and went into hiding. Joint patrol groups had proven their effectiveness, and more species asked to join the security initiative because they had seen that cooperation worked. Kate Stevens gave a speech at a Galactic Council meeting, and she talked about how the successful defense had been a team effort involving multiple species working together. She emphasized that humans did not want to be the galaxy police force, but they were willing to be partners in maintaining peace and security. The council gave her a standing ovation, and several species formally requested military cooperation agreements with Earth. Back on the Thunderhawk, Rachel sat in her captain chair and reviewed the battle reports, and she felt satisfied with how her crew and her allied ships had performed. Ami came onto the bridge, and she reported that there had been minimal casualties on their side, and everyone who had been injured was expected to make full recoveries. Rachel thanked her, and then she called Lyria on the secure channel to make sure the Sylvari squadron was okay. Lyria answered, and she was tired but happy, and she said her ships had performed well, and she was proud of her crews. The 2 captains talked for a few minutes, and they agreed to meet on Gateway 7 in a week to celebrate the victory and to plan for future operations. As Rachel ended the call, she looked out at the stars, and she thought about how far humanity had come in such a short time. 50 years ago, humans had been confined to one solar system, and now they were helping to shape the future of the entire galaxy. She knew there would be more challenges ahead and more battles to fight and more problems to solve, but she also knew that humans were not alone anymore, and they had friends and allies who would stand with them. Galaxy was a dangerous place, but it was also full of possibilities, and Rachel was excited to see what the future would bring. She thought about the Sylvari who had learned that strength and compassion could coexist, and she thought about all the other species who were learning the same lesson. Humans had a lot to teach the galaxy, but they also had a lot to learn in the exchange of knowledge, and culture and ideas would make everyone stronger. Rachel smiled and gave orders to her crew to set a course for their next patrol route. Because there was always more work to do, the Thunderhawk turned and accelerated into the black, and behind it, Gateway 7 gleamed with the lights of dozens of species living and working together. Somewhere in the darkness, pirates and criminals and other threats were learning that the galaxy had changed, and that predators were no longer safe from consequences. The age of human involvement in galactic affairs had truly begun, and nothing would ever be quite the same.